Hello everyone, this is Jinx, one of the Monster Hunter math guys. So with the last update also came a new weapon, the winner of the last weapon design contest, the Bleagle. Now this is a beautifully designed weapon, and the last winner of the weapon design contest was the gas-powered stick, and we all remember how powerful that weapon was. So now a question I've been hearing a lot is, how strong is the Bleagle? And the answer to that is a resounding and that was my entry to the next contest Capcom is having, which is the most amount of subtext you can possibly fit into a single syllable. So the weapon is not terrible, but it's also not great. It is not a standout or meta-defining, but it does have some situations it may compete in. Now before we break all of this down, because there's quite a bit to talk about and quite a bit of math to do, quick reminder, we do have a Twitter where we post updates about videos and various things that interest us, and Tuna does also stream live on Twitch almost every single day. And also, disclaimer, this is a game, play how you like and enjoy yourself. I am going to be breaking down how strong and or weak the Bleagle is, but at the end of the day, it's a really sexy looking charge blade and play what you enjoy. Just like, don't use it against thunder immune monsters in multiplayer unless your teammates are cool with it. Play how you like and enjoy yourself, just be considerate of your teammates in multiplayer. Okay, so let's break this down real quick. What do the Bleagle stats look like? So it has 864 attack. Now the bloat value for charge blade is 3.6, so when we divide that by 3.6, we get 240 true raw. This is extremely low. In fact, this is the second lowest you can get out of a fully upgraded master rank weapon, the lowest being 230. By comparison, the highest true raw you can get is the Rajang charge blade at 310, almost a full 30% higher. But that's fine, this isn't an impact phial charge blade which wants to have high base true raw, it's a power element phial, so we want more elements. Except this also has 270 base elements, which is minuscule. Now you can only get one element augment on here, since you're running charge blade, you're going to want to run health augment to heal up chip damage. This is obviously a unique model weapon, so it cannot get custom augments, meaning that at most you can hit 460 element with Thunder Attack 6 and 1 element augments. That puts you at 46 true element, which is really low for a power element phial charge blade. However, it does get 10% affinity at base, which is pretty nice. It saves us some slot efficiency. It does get 2 level 1 slots as well. And then it does have its big advantage of having 80 natural units of purple. However, as we did cover in our video talking about sharpness, purple sharpness is not that great. Now, its elemental damage increase is 8.7% over white sharpness, which is pretty good, but the raw damage is only 5.3%. Overall, it's definitely a buff, it's an increase, but it's not that huge an increase and doesn't really make up for how low the raw and element is on this charge blade. In fact, let's just compare the base stats versus the two other competitors for Thunder Power Element phial charge blades. These two competitors are the Zynoga charge blade and the Tobakadachi charge blade. Now before I get into this, I do want to clarify, this is not a good way to determine whether a weapon is good or not versus others. In order to make a judgment whether one weapon is better than the other, you have to compare builds. There are so many factors that go into build efficiency and how builds work that can determine whether one weapon is better or not. For example, you can be 5% affinity short on one weapon versus another, but because of the way the build is and you're lacking level 2 slots, you end up having to lose a level 4 slot to make up that 5% affinity. Again, this is a terrible way to make a final judgment on whether a weapon is good versus others, however, it is a good way for you to start. So first off, we have the true raw, so for the Bleagle that's 240, Zynoga is 760, and Toby is 230. Then we have the base true elements, so 27, 39, and 33. Now the Tobakadachi has less true raw and less base true element than the Zynoga charge blade, so it's starting to look bad. Except it's a rarity 10 with custom, so it can actually hit 66 max element with element attack 6 and all of the element customs and augments while still fitting in a health augment. In fact, if we look at the max potential element on each of these charge blades with a health augment still in there, the Bleagle only hits 46 while the Zynoga hits 57. Mind you, this 46 is with one elemental augment on the Bleagle. Because of the fact that it has 10% affinity, it doesn't need to run an affinity augment. On the other hand, the Zinogre Charge Blade does run an affinity augment and no elemental augments. So overall, right now the Bleagle is not looking very good, but it does have natural purple sharpness, while the Zinogre and the Toby both have natural white. However, if we account for the modifiers on raw and elemental for sharpness, then the Bleagle in purple still hits weaker than the Zinogre does in white, by a pretty significant margin. Again, purple sharpness ain't that great. Even with purple sharpness, it'll still be hitting less damage per hit than the Zinogre does in white sharpness. And even though it's not easy to see or apparent from these base stats, in end builds, the Toby tends to hit higher damage than the Zinogre does. So this is not looking great for the Bleagle, but again, this is not a good way to determine whether a weapon is better or not, it's just a starting point. So next, instead, let's take a look at actual builds for this. Now, Charge Blade builds are a bit complicated. One elemental weapon can easily run like 5 to 8 different builds. But let's first off narrow this down by determining what we would actually use the Bleagle for. So there are two primary styles of fighting with Elemental Charge Blade. One is SAED Spam, which is more of the classic base game style, and the other is Savage Axe. Now we can completely strike off SAED playstyle from the Bleagle's possible playstyles. This is because CBs for SAED playstyle only care about one thing: how big can I get my elemental number? Elemental phials are not affected by crits and they are not affected by sharpness, so they do not care about the purple sharpness or the affinity on the Bleagle. If you are going to be using power element phial SAEDs, not a Thunderweak monster, you just use the Toby Kadachi because it hits 43% higher elements, meaning it deals 43% more damage per phial. In fact, the damage on these is so low that even if you hit a really good elemental hit zone like Naga Kuga's head with an elemental phial from your SAED, you're doing less than you would with an impact phial. And impact phials deal the same damage no matter what body part they hit, and they also KO. So yeah, we can go ahead and strike off any of the SAED playstyles. That leaves only Savage Axe builds. Now for Savage Axe builds, there's generally two different kinds of builds you go for. You can go for a Master's Touch set, which does lower your damage by quite a bit, but it does allow you to not have to deal with sharpness issues. However, since we have 80 natural purple, we're not gonna go with that. The other option is a True Crit Element set. So True Crit Element sets on CBs, simply put, give you the highest possible Savage Axe damage, but in exchange you do lose KO potential you would get with impact phials. Now, because of the fact that we do have 80 natural units of purple, we don't necessarily need to run any handicraft or any protective polish in the set. This is the only real advantage the Bleagle has, but it is a nice one. Now, with 80 units of purple and Savage Axe, you can actually burn through that very quickly if you play very aggressively. But we're just going to assume 80 units is enough in between a monster transitioning areas. You also don't really need focus on a Savage Axe playstyle because you don't really need to charge that many phials to keep your Savage Axe up. The only reason focus was mandatory in base game Charge Blade sets is because you were pumping out an SAED every 15 seconds. But most Charge Blade users are used to focus, so we're gonna go ahead and only compare focus builds here. You can also fit an Offensive Guard into the set if you drop down to Guard 1, however, we're not going to do that. Offensive Guard's interaction with Savage Axe is a little weird because you get most of your Savage Axe combos out during downs, but you don't get Offensive Guard during downs unless you got really lucky. Also, Guard 1 is only for certain matchups, Guard 3 is the general good guard level to run for Charge Blade now. Now we're going to be comparing this to a very similar set for the Zinogre Charge Blade. Only real difference in this set is we do have to run an Affinity Augment instead of an Element Augment, and we do have to run Protective Polish. Between the Protective Polish and the 60 natural units of white, this should be more than equal to the 80 units of purple we had on the previous set. We unfortunately are not able to hit the 100% affinity we would like, but it's not the hugest deal because we're not running Master's Touch. And then we'll also be comparing this to a very similar set for the Kodachi Charge Blade. Now, because the Kodachi Charge Blade is a rarity 10 and a custom, we can get 3 elemental augments on here with a health augment and then also get 5 elemental customs. Elemental R10 custom weapons are stupidly good. Now, between the 50 units of natural white and the protective polish, we will get close to the same sharpness as our 80 units of purple sharpness that we had on the Bleagle. It won't be quite as good, and if you really do want some extra handicraft, you can put a handicraft plus deco in instead of one of the expert plus decos. It doesn't really change the comparisons that much. And then finally, since we're talking thunder weapons, we do need to talk about the Rajang Charge Blade, even though it is an Impact Charge Blade. Now, because it is an Impact Charge Blade, we run Master's Touch as well as Artillery 3, not 5. We have a video coming out very soon explaining why you don't want Artillery 5. If you're wondering why we're running Guard 5 here, it's because it's literally free. In a no offensive guard set, running a different charm than this guard charm doesn't actually gain us any skills. Now, unfortunately, we can only get to 90% affinity with Master's Touch and 20 units of white sharpness. However, this is still overall going to be more sharpness than the 80 units we have on the Bleagle. Alright, let's compare what the Savage Axe damage looks like on these. So in these particular comparisons, we are going to be looking at a training pole level of hit zone values. Even though this is not realistic for an actual monster, we do this because it is the best case scenario for the Bleagle. Simply put, the Bleagle will be dealing the most raw damage and the training pole favors raw damage. We'll also look at what it looks like on Nagakuga's head in a bit. But so in the first category here, we have the effective raw, we have the effective element, we have our base element or raw, which is used for phial calculations, as well as artillery mods for the Rajang. As for the combos themselves, we're looking at specifically Savage Axe AED combos, as well as Savage Axe Elemental Discharge 2 into Upswing Looping combos. These two are your bread and butter when it comes to Savage Axe. We have calculated both the raw as well as elemental damage separately and accounted for all rounding points that the game's formulas use. Then we total that together to get the total damage for our amped elemental discharges as well as our elemental discharge 2 into upswing combo loops. And then we have our damage deltas, which is basically the difference in damage between the particular build in question and the Bleagle. Alright, let's pull all of this together real quick to make it easier to look at. So as you can see, because the Bleagle doesn't have to run Protective Polish, we can fit in some more damage skills, and this lets it hit a higher EFR than the other competitors for PEP CBs. However, its effective element is still lower. And this is what ends up killing it, so its total AED damage is 855. And its total elemental discharge 2 into upswing combo damage is 1061. For the sake of my sanity, I'm going to be calling this combo the bread and butter from now on. Also, because it is a variable tick rate for the Savage Axe ticks, for the AED I just assumed 3 ticks. And for the bread and butter, I assume 4 ticks for Elemental Discharge 2, as well as 3 ticks for Upswing. This is the average amount that our friend HCZS got in the background footage for this video, at least when aiming specifically for Nagakuga's head. Because the tick rates are variable based on so many in-game factors, we just have to make assumptions to get anywhere. Now, the Zin Charge Blade does hit 921 on AED and 1098 on the bread and butter. This puts it at 7.72% higher damage on AED and 3.49% on the bread and butter. And the Toby Kodachi deals 960 on the AED and 1092 on the bread and butter. This is a massive 12.28% on the AED and 2.92% on the bread and butter. And remember, this is an unrealistically high raw hit zone value that favors the Bleagle. Now for the Rajang Charge Blade, we are looking at 840 and 1060, which are both lower than the Bleagle's, 1.75% and 0.09% to be precise. But remember, the Rajang's phial damage deals the same damage no matter what you hit, and it gets KO. And AEDs deal a lot of KO damage. So already it's looking quite a bit worse than the other options, and this is a favorable comparison. Next up, let's look at something more realistic like a Nagakuga head. Now when softened, Nagakuga's head does go over 65 hit zone value, but we'll just go with the non-softened value for now. When softened Naga's head's hitting something around the 75 hit zone value, which is so close to our last comparison, we might as well just compare this lower value. But now that we have even less raw damage coming out, we can see that the Zin and Toby Charge Blade are hitting much higher than they were previously relative to the Bleagle. Now the Rajang Charge Blade is dropping down now comparatively. However, with a 5 to 7% or so damage drop, this still gets KO as well as more sharpness compared to the Bleagle. At this point, we can pretty firmly state that the Bleagle deals the lowest damage out of every single PEP CB option for Thunder. However, you don't have to use Protective Polish, which is pretty nice. Overall, this can make it quite a bit comfier compared to using the Zenogre or Tobakadachi Charge Blade, but I'm not really sure if it's worth a 14 to 8% drop on AED damage. And honestly, the bigger issue is, even if this was a huge standout for a Thunder Charge Blade, Thunder Charge Blades kinda suck stat-wise. And on top of that, it's one of the worst elements in terms of elemental matchups. In terms of monsters actually weak enough to Thunder for you to want to run Thunder instead of raw damage against them, the list is only Viper Tobakadachi, Tigrex, Nagakuga, Puke, Juratodus, Goldrathian, and Dodogama. And on top of that, on all of these, the damage is only slightly lower to just run an Impact Charge Blade instead, but you also get KO, which is really valuable on a lot of these matchups. I think part of the reason why across the board Thunder weapons are kind of terrible and Thunder matchups are pretty bad is because it is the most ubiquitous element, meaning that the most monsters in the game have an average weakness to it, which would make you think maybe this is meant to be a general use elemental charge blade. After all, it has 80 purple sharpness, everything's kinda weak to Thunder, but being a general use comfy sharpness thing is kind of Impact Charge Blade's whole deal. Everything is weak to raw damage, and also they get KO on top of that, and they get to run Master's Touch, and on the Goldrathian Charge Blade you have 17 natural units of white plus Master's Touch with over 100% affinity. And on top of that, if we're talking about non-Thunder weak matchups with average Thunder weaknesses, the Bleagle's damage is laughably lower than the Goldrathian's, and it doesn't get KO or poison, and it gets less sharpness. A Goldrathian AED with Offensive Guard deals 35% more damage, or 22.46% less if Offensive Guard isn't active. And the set is so much easier to put together compared to a True Kit Element set. And if you try to run a raw build on the Bleagle compared to a True Kit Element set, you lose even more damage. So yeah, as far as it goes for a Thunder Charge Blade, the Bleagle isn't terrible. It does deal less damage than the other options, but it is a lot comfier because of the 18 natural units of purple. The nice thing about the Bleagle is if you burn through all the purple, when you hit white, you're not losing that much damage from being in white sharpness. While on the Zenogre or Tobakadachi Charge Blade, when you hit blue sharpness, you're losing quite a bit of damage. So it does have that, but it does have the issue that it's a Thunder weapon. There are just so few monsters that have a high Thunder weakness. And even the ones that do, the damage gain from running the Bleagle versus an Impact Charge Blade is so low, you probably should just run an Impact Charge Blade because KO is really nice for Savage Axe playstyle. But it isn't terrible for a Thunder Charge Blade, so if you're fighting Thunder weak monsters, go for it. Just know you'll be losing up to 30-40% damage running it against anything that's not Thunder weak. Would not recommend. Alright, that's all I have for this one. Thank you so much for joining us as always. If you have any friends who would be interested in the math behind the Bleagle, be sure to share the video with them. And if you enjoyed the breakdown, be sure to let us know by liking the video and letting us know in the comment below what you think of the Bleagle. And thank you as always to Honey over at honeyhuntersworld.com for creating and maintaining the tools we use to make all of our sets with. And a huge thank you to our friend HCZS, who was not only invaluable in discussing all the intricacies of the Bleagle, but also provided the background footage for this video. He's a phenomenal Charge Blade speedrunner. Be sure to go check out his channel, link in the top right and the description. And don't forget to check out our Discord server, the Mathless Nest, if you'd like to meet like-minded hunters to hunt with of all different skill levels, or just come and chat. Just please keep all Iceborne related discussion to the Iceborne specific channels so that our PC players can avoid spoilers. And don't forget to check out our Twitter, where we post updates to videos and various things that interest us, and that Tuna does stream live on Twitch almost every single day. Other than sharing the video, following us on those two platforms is one of the best ways you can help support us completely for free. And of course, none of this would be possible without the generosity of our patrons. No new patrons today, but regardless, thank you so much for the support. Alright, that is everything I have for you on this one. The Elemental Lance meta video is coming out very soon. I also have a video about Artillery 5 coming out as well. So be sure to subscribe and hit a notification bell if you'd like to see those as soon as possible, because clicking notification bell tells YouTube, hey, I want to see these peeps' videos more often. And then YouTube tells you when videos come out. Alright, have a good one everyone. Happy hunting, hunters. Bye!